Hello everyone and welcome to the Sanchez Guitar Zone. You might have noticed something a bit different today. Yes, this is my very first video recorded entirely in English. Consider this a massive experiment for the channel. Your feedback and the overall response to the episode will directly decide whether this is a one-shot or whether we continue producing these international materials as well. So please let me know what you think in the comments. Now let's get down to business. Recently in my Polish episode we've been breaking down Fender's aggressive litigation strategy in Germany. We talk about the mass lawsuits, the draconian Abmachungs and disease letters, and how this entire legal offensive rests on a rather extraordinary theory, that on a courtroom floor, the 1954 Stratocaster design should not be treated as an industrial product, but as a fully fledged work of applied art. Today I want to dive into a thread that so far no one is talking about in the public discussion surrounding the case. It's an absolute treat for anyone that is interested in guitar history and intellectual property law. We are going to dissect the architecture of Fender's claim and collide it with the well-documented history of how this iconic instrument was actually created. The fundamental question we have to ask today is who actually owns the copyright to the Stratocaster under European law, and who, strictly legally speaking, is the true creator. Let's strip away the corporate logos for a minute and take a closer look. To fully grasp the uphill battle Fender's lawyers are facing, we first need to contrast two completely different legal frameworks. In the United States, the ruling doctrine is work for hire. In a nutshell, this means that if you design something as an employee of a company, or even as a founder within your official duties, US law recognizes the corporation as the original author and owner of all rights from day one. For American corporations, this is the natural default state of the universe. However, the dispute in Düsseldorf is taking place in a German court, where just like in Poland and most of Europe, the monistic concept of copyright applies. What does this mean in practice? Copyright, right here, is inextricably and personally tied to the creator as a physical human being. It is born in the mind of a specific person and is absolutely non-transferable during their lifetime. A creator cannot simply sell it or sign it away to a corporation in an employment contract. A company can only acquire the economic rights to exploit it, essentially a manufacturing license. Furthermore, when a creator dies, these rights don't just melt into the corporate entity, they automatically pass on to the creator's legal heir or beneficiaries. And this is exactly where the first massive, intriguing problem appears in a courtroom for Fender. When drafting the lawsuit for the German court, Fender's lawyers had to play by these European rules. They couldn't simply write FMIC in the author box. They had to name a specific human being, so they pointed to Leo Fender as the sole creator of the body shape. We're actually stepping into a historical and legal minefield here. Leo died in March 1991. By today's standard, German copyright law protects a work for 70 years after the creator's death, which would theoretically stretch Fender's monopoly until 2061. But there's a fascinating catch. The Stratocaster was created in 1954, a time when German law only provided a 50-year post-mortem protection period. Even though more than 70-year protection generally applies retroactively to all works, Fender's lawyers played it incredibly safe by calculating their claims around the original 50-year mark, which expires in 2041. Most likely, they used the older, shorter term as a calculated legal precaution, a safety net to guarantee their injunction today without getting dragged into debates about retroactive term extensions. But whether we are talking about 50 or 70 years, in a full-blown trial, Fender faces a monumental documentation challenge. The defense can demand a complete, bulletproof chain of title showing that Leo Fender's heirs formally transferred this specific European economic copyright to the modern FMIC corporation after 1991. Remember, Leo sold the company in 1965 and later founded direct competitors, first Music Man and then G&L, proving that the modern Fender Corporation still holds the pristine copyrights of a man who left the building half a century ago is actually a massive legal hurdle. Even if the paperwork is flawless, another major issue arises. Naming Leo Fender as the sole author of the Stratocaster design is a massive historical oversimplification. Leo was a genius engineer and organizer, but he didn't even know how to tune the guitar. The Stratocaster wasn't the vision of a lone sculptor. It was the result of intense teamwork in a Fullerton workshop with highly specific contribution from different experts. Leo Fender, the mastermind of mechanics and production. He wasn't sculpting wood. He was solving engineering problems. He designed a revolutionary synchronized tremolo bridge, decided on a versatile free pickup configuration, and came up with the brilliant idea of using the pickguard as the sort of guitar's motherboard by mounting all electronics directly onto a single piece of plastic. He made factory assembly and future stage repairs incredibly fast and efficient. Next, George Fullerton, Leo's right-hand man and a master of physical prototyping. While others sketch on paper, Fullerton was the guy figuring how to translate those wild curves into physical routing templates and jigs for the factory floor. He also designed the iconic recessed bolt input jack, a pure engineering solution designed so the cable wouldn't stick straight out and get snapped off if a player stepped on it on a stage. On top of that, George's wife, Lucille, was the one to come up with the famous original counterbody slogan that became a legendary decal on a Strat headstock. Then we have Don Randall, the head of sales and marketing. He came up with the name Stratocaster and brought crucial feedback from the market that the musicians felt that the Telecaster body was too blocky and uncomfortable. Then Freddie Tavares, a brilliant session musician and a talented craftsman. He sat at a drafting board and gave the instruments its asymmetric shape and deep double cutaways, ensuring visual flow and balance. Last but not least, Rex Gallion and Bill Carson, active guitarists relentlessly testing the prototypes. Gallion famously asked Leo, "Why not get away from a body that is always digging into your ribs?" Their constant complaints about the discomfort of the slab-bodied Telecaster forced the introduction of the famous ergonomic cuts. The final outcome, the body of Stratocaster, was the joint creation of an entire team of engineers, marketers, and musicians. This brings us to the ultimate collision of history and law. If a court recognized Stratocaster as a collaborative work, Fender would have to prove joint authorship, Mitürheberschaft. In the famous 2013 birthday train case, the German Federal Court made it easier for the industrial designers to claim copyright, but simultaneously they maintained one ironclad rule. Every co-author's contribution must have an artistic character, an original creative expression. To make this crystal clear, a design choice can only be considered artistic if the creator had the freedom to make an aesthetic decision just for the sake of how they look. If a shape or a feature is forced by technical necessity, efficiency, or the need to solve a physical problem, it legally cannot be considered an art. It's simply engineering. How does that apply to the reality of our case? Leo Fender's contribution, the tremolo, the pickguard, motherboard, etc., was pure mechanics and production engineering. George Fullerton's contribution, the recessed jack, the routing templates, was physical problem solving and manufacturing logistics. Carson and Gallion's contribution, so the body contours, were purely ergonomics, dictated by the anatomy of a musician, not by the artistic taste. Then Don Randall's contribution was purely business vision, which means that out of this entire team, the only person who gave the body a purely aesthetic quality was actually Freddie Tavares. So if we had to point to a single legal author of this shape under strict European copyright definitions, it would actually be Freddie, not Leo. The EU Court of Justice, ruling in a Brompton bicycle case, ruled definitively that any shape dictated strictly by technical function or ergonomic requirements is completely excluded from copyright protection. The belly cut, the forearm bevel, the asymmetrical horns for strap balance, the recessed jack, these are all functional solutions. Back in 1954 in California, they weren't sculpting a piece for an art gallery. They were building a highly precise ergonomic tool for working professionals. Trying to classify the Stratocaster today as a work of art just to save European market licenses is actually skating on incredibly thin ice. Fender's current litigation strategy, relying on default judgments, is giving them temporary victories. But our analysis today shows that the legal architecture they are actually leaning on is full of massive loopholes. From the 1954 legal precautions and inheritance rights to the fierce clash between pure functionality and the legal definition of art. If one of the massive players in the market decides to engage them in a full merits based legal battle, hopefully it would be PRS, we could witness a trial that will redefine the boundaries of intellectual property in the entire music industry. What do you guys think? Where would you draw the line between engineering and art when it comes to guitars? Let me know in the comments below. Hit subscribe, and I'll see you in the next episode. Cheers!